I'm Teddy with Sunstone Winery.
I'm Kalon with Splash Nano.
And you're watching Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina.
Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. We have a very special episode today. I am here with two entrepreneurs and really titans in their field. And we're going to talk about an amazing topic that is something we don't really know a lot about, but these two experts are going to educate us on it. And so let me introduce right away Teddy Cabugos, president of Sunstone Winery. Everybody knows Teddy. You're like a local legend, of course. And Kalon Baird, who is the co-founder of Splash Nano. And I've had the opportunity to talk to these two individuals for various stories. And you guys are amazing. And you are on the front lines of trying to do something that could really be an incredible sort of gold rush, an opportunity for California and around the country. You're the first winery that is dabbling, that is exploring this world of THC-derived beverages, hemp beverages, if you will. And we're going to learn all about what that means, because there's a lot of people don't know a lot about it, and there's regulation issues, and you guys are experts, and so you're going to talk about it. So Teddy and Kalon, thanks so much for being part of the show today, and I'm really looking forward to it. Let's dive right in. What are you guys trying to do here? THC-derived beverages, hemp-derived beverages. What is it? Talk to us about what's going on in this space.
Well, really what it's recognizing is the people kind of transitioning away from alcohol. We're kind of in this cultural shift here. It's like a global revolution, really what it is and what I call it, of people simply drinking less alcohol. Mostly younger generations, the 21 to 30-year-olds simply aren't drinking alcohol like when we were 21. Also, older people are just drinking less and moving towards these low-dose THC beverages and or wellness, functional beverages. And so we thought of innovators in California, and it's where, wineries, and it was a perfect, kind of brand to transition into, being one of those innovators and trying to get to the modern day consumer. And so, it's been received really, really great, and it's exciting times.
What does it mean to be able to go into this space? Because you have this incredible brand at Sunstone with your winery, and we see it all over town. It's very popular locally, internationally. From a tourism perspective, Sunstone is on the map. So what are you trying to do here with this additional beverage? How does it add, complement? How does it relate to sort of Sunstone?
Right. Well, that's a great question, because the travel and tourism and hospitality is kind of where Sunstone sits. We welcome, close to 100,000 visitors a year from all around the world. And so the travel and tourism hospitality space is really going to play, I think, the biggest role into helping this industry normalize the industry, come up with responsible consumption, education, because the travel and tourism industry and hospitality places, hotels, all these, restaurants, bars, taverns, they already have a setup to be able to educate on beer, alcohol. So it transitions right into that space. And so with the agriculture, everything that California brings, and of course Santa Barbara County climate, I think that we have the opportunity, not only California to be some of the biggest innovators, because as California goes, the rest of the country goes, but really the rest of the world goes. As you know, we just became very recently the 4th largest economy in the world, and that's a huge deal. Just this state alone, and there's just a ton of opportunity, and so I think it's just an easy transition to be able to do it.
So help me understand this. Obviously, you mentioned alcohol, right? So we can go to anywhere, people can get a beer, buy alcohol. What you're trying to do is currently, at least in California, not allowed, right? So you're trying to create, distribute a THC-derived hemp beverage. What is the challenge and obstacle in doing that? Because you're doing a lot of work with, you're hanging out with these elected officials in Washington, D.C. What's the challenge to actually get this out there to people in California?
Well, it all comes down to responsible regulations. And so the biggest issue in the hemp space has been, the 2018 Farm Bill, and Kalon can talk a little bit better to this, people taking advantage of a loophole and really putting out products that they shouldn't be. And so it got, in California, it shut it down for everybody, the good actors, people like us. So what we've been working on since the shutdown is working with people to show them and come up with suggestions for responsible regulations, because we believe in responsible regulations as well. Age gating, proper labeling, strict testing. And we created that product, and we did all those things that technically you didn't have to do, just to show here's how it's done properly. And so that's why we're showing it, across in DC and all those other places, because we think that we've put a best-in-class product onto the market. And so even recently, the California Department of Public Health, they sent out a memo to hemp stakeholders asking for feedback. And so we just submitted a letter, which I think is public, you could go find, to that and how to responsibly put those regulations in place.
So, Kalon, let me direct the question at you. So cannabis is legal in California, right? We've sort of overcome all of that.
Technically marijuana. Yeah.
Marijuana, right? And so you're going to be the expert.
Yeah.
You're going to correct me on every word here, because you know
it's
it.
all good.
So people can use marijuana, right, in a variety of different ways, but you can't drink a hemp-derived beverage. So help me understand what's going on with the laws there.
So it's really interesting. I mean, first of all, it's the same plant, right? Yeah. So the marijuana plant and the hemp plant, essentially Cannabis sativa L, right? That's the genus and species. They're the same thing. The dispensary system, which was legalized by Prop 64, is where people find marijuana products, or really any THC-infused products. That system is very archaic at this point in terms of the evolution of how people access this plant. A lot of THC drinks don't do well in dispensaries. They're not really set up for it. The typical consumer that's going to a dispensary is looking for high potency, flower, edibles, vapes, stuff like that. They're like smoke shops. Whereas THC beverages really deserve to be sold where other beverages are sold, right? People go to wineries, people go to liquor stores, people go to grocery stores. That's where they find their beverages, intoxicating or otherwise. So you have this conundrum where this huge category that really is the biggest consumer packaged goods category, which is beverage, is kind of excluded from dispensaries from an economic perspective. Now, the state of California went ahead and basically made illegal any THC infused product that doesn't go through dispensaries due to a lot of different reasons. And some of it was rooted in public health, and some of it's rooted in politics, where you have dispensary people, that feel that they paid all this money for licenses and that they should be the ones to be the stewards of anything infused. So you have this dichotomy that exists where people want access to this product, dispensaries push back on it, and public health doesn't know how to wrap their heads around it. So that's really the trifecta that we're dealing with here, and it's ultimately a lack of education. Even at the highest levels in Sacramento, the nuances of what we're talking about are way too deep for policymakers to really wrap their heads around. So they need industry folks and stewards across the aisle from alcohol and the cannabis marijuana side of things to be able to ideally give them the best practices that they need to allow access to everybody.
And sorry, really quickly, just to jump in, I think Kalon can even elaborate more, but beverages are kind of a product of their own, or a category of their own in this space, because the interesting thing of, cannabis, hemp, there's so many different ways to use it. Smoking it, vape pens, edible, all these different edibles, you can make almost anything with it. And then the beverage sector is, again, it kind of stands on a category of its own as to where it really can fall in line with, a three-tier alcohol system that currently already exists. So there's a model for it currently as to where in the other cannabis space, due to all the other products, the model is still kind of all over the place.
So basically, you want to create a world where you go into Albertsons and you can buy a Diet Coke, you can get a 12-pack of whatever beer. Anywhere
alcoholic beverages are sold, you should be able to buy one of these products, whether that's stadiums, concession stands. Again, anywhere you can buy an alcoholic beverage for sale, you should also be able to buy one.
Because they have the channel capacity to be able to check ID, to make sure that they're age gated, and we're big proponents of that. We're big proponents of 21 and over. and low dose, right? Because I think that there's really no risk to the public if you serve 2.5 to 5 milligram beverages to people. I mean, we can get into the dosage and stuff and how that compares, but
So the state of California says right now all this stuff has to go through a dispensary.
Right.
You can't have it at a grocery store. And
Right.
much of that, it sounds like, is kind of ignorance. It's caught up in the politics and the stigma, and maybe they're not listening to all of the experts. And of course, there's pushback and all of that. So you want to sort of work to create a world where any place that you can buy alcohol, you can buy the hemp-derived beverages. So for people who are, and I've talked to Teddy about this, right? Like there's different levels of consumer out there, right? There's your traditional high user, stoner type, you know,
We
they
all know that type.
can't get out of bed without doing it, right? That's not what you guys are all about. You guys are about low dose in a beverage to basically relax a little bit.
it's like a supplement. It's just
Okay.
an ingredient, you know. It's one more thing that is natural, that can alter your mood, and we can, you know, on my side of the fence, you know, I'm the product development side, so the science end. We've gotten it to the point where we can modulate essentially like what like a half a glass of wine would mimic for you.
Okay.
They're obviously completely different molecules, completely different receptorology, but that's like the best comparison because we have to make that comparison in such the early and nascent days of this, where we don't have a lot of people who understand what the dosage is, what the onset is, you know, how capable or inebriated you might feel person to person. It's a completely different universe. But alcohol, because it's a beverage, makes the most sense to kind of compare it to.
You're not talking about, like, the market is probably not college students on a Friday night who are going to be loading up on your hemp beverages. It's going to be, I mean, maybe,
knows?
but it's
So
primarily
that's
like
actually kind of what
somebody.
it's for. So again, I look at it like going to a party or an event, right? And you're gonna go drink a few beverages, or how many beers somebody's gonna drink, or glasses of wine, or cocktails, or whatever it may be. Now, if those get replaced, again, due to less people drinking, and everybody's taking a hit, every store, every bar, every restaurant, they'll tell you that their alcohol sales have been down over the past couple of years. And if they had something to replace those alcohol sales, this is the perfect replacement, because people can go, being low dose, they can go drink 2-3 of them over a course of a 4-hour period and be okay, and just kind of have that extra little buzz. But you're not going to take away the hangover, the extra calories or alcohol, or any way the alcohol makes you
What
feel.
I'm getting at is that, you know, an average couple, right? You know, whatever that is, a family of 4, is not going to go Friday night to, you know, pick up their nachos for dinner, you know, and their tacos, and then walk into a dispensary.
No.
But they will go to Albertsons or someplace
Total
and get,
Wine,
you know, and so that's a market, right? And we're talking low dose. It's like a supplement, you said, right? And so that's right.
But if they're eating nachos, they'll be well, because I'm assuming that the place serving nachos also serves beers.
Yes.
So if they're eating nachos, they'd be like, well, I don't even drink beer anymore, but you have that on the menu, perfect, I'll take one of those.
Okay.
And so that's why it's doing so well in places like states like Minnesota. It's bars or,
I want to get into that. 'cause,
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
Minnesota is
So
just.
talk to me about what's happening outside of California. So we think of California as the most progressive everything,
so you should be able to drink one with your nachos,
right?
is
But
my
you
point.
can in Minnesota, but
Well,
not
so
here.
yeah, Minnesota is just a fascinating case study. You know, they got rocked by the George Floyd scandal. They got rocked by COVID, and basically the mayor said, "Hey, breweries were just tanking. I mean, the craft brew industry was literally going bankrupt." And they said, "Sure, you know, hemp's legal, I guess. You guys go ahead and, you know, brew it and serve it at your little breweries and tasting rooms and at events." And they just kind of ran with it. And that was a couple years ago. And now they have like really great stats. They're kind of like the canary in the coal mine, if you will. 20% of liquor store sales are THC beverages, while they only make up 1% of the total available products in the store. So it's outperforming, you know, everything, and it's the smallest like inventory in
And
the store.
brewery percentages
On
are even higher.
premise.
On premise are
40%. So they're able to sell a beer and a THC beverage side by side. Okay. Right. The brewers love it, by the way, because it takes them a week or two to turn over a batch of brew. It takes them a day to turn over a batch of hemp beverage. Okay. So their throughput just increased, and they got co-packing opportunities for the rest of the country. So people are using the Minnesota brewers to can their beverages to be sold in Georgia, New York, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina. So it's been an incredible boom to their industry, and it's going well, right? You haven't heard anything on the news of THC beverages like kill everybody. Like, you just don't see that, right? So they're really an interesting case study, and people should be looking at that. And California really should be looking at that as proof of concept that, hey, a state can do this.
And it's like, if you ask those brewers or the owners of those places, who would you rather be in here? Like, people drinking a bunch of alcohol until they're blacked out, or people drinking cannabis beverages? It's cannabis beverage every time.
Well, tell them about the story. I mean, we've thrown tasting parties
right.
at the winery.
Yeah. There's people it's a whole different way of people reacting from alcohol to that. And so
there's no broken glasses.
Right.
There's no, the urinals aren't overflowing. There's no fights breaking out.
It's not sloppy.
It's not
Right.
sloppy.
Exactly.
People are just like, stoked. It's a totally different experience.
So you are the product developer, which means you're figuring out a way to make it sort of feel like a half a glass of wine or something like that. And I know we have a lot to talk about, but can you just talk a second about what the science or the chemistry is
Totally.
of what you do to make these taste good and appeal to people?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I always believe that, anything that I create, I'm going to try to make it as clean label as possible, right? So we're not going to be adding a bunch of sugar. We're not going to be adding food coloring. We're not going to be adding artificial flavors, corn syrup. We're not going to be adding anything unhealthy. I don't believe that you need to in this day and age. We have a lot of great ingredients out there. So that being said, THC is a fat, right? So you can't just put it in a drink like you can alcohol. I think people overlook the fact that alcohol is already water soluble, right? So THC needs to be converted into a substrate that can dissolve in the tank and be homogeneous, and so every fat droplet that's in the tank is in the same corner of every single drink, and it doesn't float to the top once you put it on a shelf for a while. So that's what we created, Splash Nano. It's essentially an emulsion technology that reduces the fat droplets down to 50 nanometers in size so they can stay suspended in the beverage. That's the first step, is getting an infusion technology, and we did that 8 years ago, right? We were one of the first people to do that. The next step is figuring out, hey, what's the drink going to taste like, And then that's actually the easy part, right? We pick peach, watermelon, mango, good flavors, right? We use real juice, a little bit extra flavor, that's it. So our drinks are extremely clean label. The next step is trying to get it tested, right? So we're talking 5 milligrams, right? So 5/1000ths of a gram in 12 ounces of liquid. So it's a very, very, very small amount of actual fat and actual molecule that's being distributed evenly inside of this vessel. So it's an extreme challenge to get the potency to test. And we have a threshold, we've set our own internal threshold of 10%, plus or minus. So that's plus or minus half a milligram, right, per beverage. And that's kind of the process, right? We've got to can it, we've got to pasteurize it, we've got to make sure it's safe, we've got to make sure it meets every beverage that's tested is tested for pesticides, heavy metals, microbials, mycotoxins, water activity, foreign material, and potency, of course, which would be the cannabinoid molecules.
Goes to the process authority, all those
We get a letter from a FDA food scientist, basically, that states that the recipe is clean. We're essentially tested more than pharmaceutical drugs are tested. So it's a really interesting little science experiment that is underappreciated, I think.
So at the risk of sounding flip, you're kind of like the Willy Wonka of the hemp.
Yeah, I've been called that
space.
before. Yeah. The crazy mad
scientist.
scientist.
You're not throwing any shoes into hot boiling water, right?
No cauldrons.
So many people call him that.
Oh, okay. I thought I was going to offend him. But
No. If you catch me on a different day, my hair is up, and it's all.
Right. And so you say Minnesota's doing this. Are there other states that are able to sell hemp derived?
Yeah, there's great examples. Tennessee, Georgia, the Carolinas,
Louisiana.
It's interesting. The red states seem to be the stewards Kentucky. Of this hemp de facto cannabis.
Because it makes money and it makes sense. It's the beverage sector. Yeah, it's business, and distributors people want this. Big alcohol distributors. I mean, you're seeing Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America just put in a letter. They're flying distributors to meet with several members of Congress to talk about, because their members are everybody else.
Domestic industry.
Right.
It's also it's a GDP stimulus like we've never seen before.
We're one of the only states that actually has a ban,
Right.
like an actual ban on it, which is incredible to me. That's why it's like heartbreaking when we talk about Minnesota. We gotta like, oh well, Minnesota's doing it, and Minnesota's awesome, and thank you for being innovators in Minnesota. But California should be leading that.
So let me shift back now to what you've been doing. Both of you have, and I know you've been traveling. You have as well, and you have a big trip coming up. So Governor Gavin Newsom last year basically said we're going to have a moratorium, or we're going to not allow THC-derived beverages.
Anything THC.
Anything. And then all of a sudden, it was supposed to expire March 25th. It got extended. I mean, we're California. Now we know Gavin Newsom is possibly moving a little to the middle, to maybe run for president, but why is Gavin Newsom against this, and what are you doing to help create, to help get this legal approved?
Yeah. So what happened is, again, they took a loophole that you can put out all these products. So people weren't doing what we were doing. They were putting kind of dangerous products out on shelves, going to smoke shops. They have, gummies, 100 milligram gummies that's calling them, Fruit Loops, and taking advantage of the law. And so I understand what he did. And, as long as he's looking to put responsible regulations in place. And so he put an all-out ban on it until they could find those regulations. And so what, we've been working really hard at doing is working with our, local politicians, our state politicians, and federal politicians,
travel industry
and a lot of people in the travel
education.
So we've been on this we've been educating for 3 years on this stuff, on hundreds of events, hundreds of tasting, feedback from, and that's why I know there's an incredible product and opportunity here, and so. What I think is going to happen is responsible regulations will be put in place, and hoping that. But I also do believe, again, people were selling flour, vape pens,
in the bathwater.
Gummies.
They're just burn it all down and just kill the good actors, kill the bad actors.
And I think, again, we mentioned this earlier, because there's so many different ways to use this product. It's going to be interesting how that rolls out. Are they going to just do a beverage carve out, which a lot of people are going towards? So no hemp products to be sold that are flour, vape pens, or gummies outside of the traditional dispensary space, because that's where people are going to buy those products anyway. But for beverage, because it follows that alcohol distribution 3-tier system, everywhere that sells alcohol is already educated to age gating, proper labeling, and those types of things. And so again, that's why the beverage sector and category kind of stands on its own. And so that's what we want him to understand, and and we'd love to be able to help him. And in the travel and tourism and hospitality sector of all of this, again, there's no bigger in the United States than California in that, and it's going to play a massive role with the normalization, to this entire category. Education and all that stuff.
So you have the tourism industries, California, other states are they're on board with this. They believe this is going to be a big driver to local economies.
There's several people, major people from the travel industry that are on board. And the global travel industry. Going to Berlin to talk on a panel about travel, tourism, and hospitality in the cannabis and hemp space. I mean, again, that's going to be, as people winery, you're going to see them in Italy, in France. People have already reached that hotel rooms, those drinks you're going to see hang up at pool, Coachella. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So help me understand, why aren't you just trying to do the traditional cannabis infused sort of beverage? So if you're trying to do hemp, 5 milligrams, I know that there was talk of that in the past, of doing the 12 ounces of just the traditional cannabis infused. Why not go that route or pursue that route? And why did you pivot to hemp?
Yeah, so I have licenses in both sectors, right? So regulated marijuana licenses and a hemp license. And the amount of work it takes, first of all, to get a THC-derived beverage to market is extreme. Okay, first of all, there's no money in it. The only products that sell beverage-related in dispensaries are 100 milligram beverages. Okay, so we're talking, and shots that are 100 milligrams. So people are just looking to get as high as possible. So the price per milligram is a huge elasticity of demand factor for a consumer when they're in dispensaries. And they're looking at getting the most they can for the cheapest they can. That's where we're at. And then the taxes are so high. We have a city gross revenue tax for the dispensary, right? Then you have an excise tax on top of that, 15% going to 19%. It's compounded. Then you have the sales tax, which is on top of the other two taxes. So it ends up being an effective 40% tax on these beverages. And you can't compete a low-dose beverage against a 100 milligram beverage when you're talking price per milligram. And the data supports this. So and then the logistics of moving it around the state. I mean, most of the trucks that move products from dispensary to dispensary are tiny Sprinter vans and Ford Transits. You need 18-wheelers to move beverages. You also need storage space. The average dispensary is a couple hundred square feet. They're storing vape carts in boxes like this big. You need pallets for beverages. So the system just really isn't set up for it. It was never set up for beverage. It was meant to be, these are innovative products that have kind of matriculated and eclipsed the level of sophistication that we had when we legalized Prop 64. Nobody intended we make suppositories. Nobody intended for that to be a form factor. Tablets, teas, topicals. These are products that have rapidly outgrown the framework that Prop 64 gave us. And so that's why we're saying, look, beverages need a carve out, because if you go to the supermarket, they're carved out. They've got an entire aisle of a cold case and waters and stuff. They're their own ecosystem. You have liquor stores are dedicated entirely to selling beverage products. Convenience stores, if you go to a convenience store, the general drinkable space is the largest space of all the aisles, right? So how are we expected to want to try to push a kind of a camel through the eye of a needle, right? In terms of dispensaries being the likely endpoint for these products. It just doesn't work.
Same plant. Why is hemp so much easier to do?
So because the Farm Bill essentially said under 0.3% by weight of Delta-9 THC would be considered the equivalent of a t-shirt. Right? Oh. So essentially by weight, now 0.3% by weight is the same as saying 3 milligrams of THC per gram of material, right? So of gummy, right? So in a 3-gram gummy, you're allowed to have 9 milligrams of THC. That's under 0.3%. That's how the math works. So you could see how people would have taken that and run with it and said, oh, well, I got 12 ounces of beverage here. 5 milligrams is way underneath the limit. And we can sell it anywhere alongside alcohol. It's not regulated, right? And that wasn't the intent of the Farm Bill. Yeah. If you ask an expert, they're not going to say that the government tried to legalize marijuana accidentally through this farm stimulus package.
And that kind of brings us back to, people like organizations like Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. They're trying to get that beverage carve out to do an amendment to the federal Farm Bill. So that 2018 Farm Bill is looking to be amended. They were trying to get to it last year. They're going to try to get to it this year. A lot of crazy stuff going on.
The toothpaste
probably going to get to it next year.
Right. The real deal is that you have marijuana. Prohibition has been a problem since 1969. Right. Controlled Substances Act. It got on the Schedule 1 list. For those that don't know, it's in the same category as heroin. Right. It's ridiculous. So it's hemp might be the thing that takes it off that list, specifically because you have this system where you have states that have legalized it. It's not a public health issue if you can sell it in a dispensary, right? It's we validate that the product is safe. You're just choosing the channel as your sort of prohibitory practice, which is kind of stupid in my opinion. So you have red states that are essentially saying, hey, we didn't have marijuana legalization, but we have hemp now and it's working. So let's just not stop it, right? It's creating jobs. It's not killing anyone. And with sensible regulations, those things can coexist together. And Lotus Beverages is not the same, Lotus THC Beverages is not the same product as a pre-roll. It's not the whole this is the stronger weed than your parents' generation. Right. It's none of that stuff. It's a very mature, very safe, very repeatable category. I mean, you can't sell black market or illicit market beverages. It's not something that someone can just make in their basement, right? These are $100 million co-packing facilities with like X-ray detectors and low fills and counter pressure sealers. I mean, these things are super advanced, right? It's the most advanced product and the safest product that you could probably mass distribute to the world.
Right. So you mentioned the larger sort of cannabis industry, the black market. Of course, there were so many expectations when it became legal and dispensaries were approved. And now we read all these stories about the tax revenue going down for these government agencies. It's not really having an impact on the black market because it's so expensive to buy it at these dispensaries. Talk to me about how you have to compete with that perception, right? So here you are trying to do a hemp infused low dose spritzer for people to chill out and relax with while they're having a party or dinner or something. Nothing at all that's like gonna cause a lot of the side effects that alcohol does. So you're over there trying to do that, but then there are people who are gonna the cannabis industry is tanking, it's horrible, it's not working, the black market is thriving. In their minds, they still kind of lump everything together.
Right.
How are you working to sort of dispel those myths that a 5 milligram hemp
Well, I think
spritzer?
the brands need to be the stewards of this stuff because they educate. So there's a lot of products out there with labels on them, right? They're not real brands. They're just a product. Someone's rushing to the shelves to fill shelf space. They put a label on it, and they're not doing the right job of educating. Sunstone, the reason why I partnered with Sunstone to develop this is we're a match made in heaven. I'm a scientist and product developer and expert in manufacturing, and Teddy has a world-class destination and has a voice, right, to consumers. People listen to sommeliers. People listen to wineries. And so they're great educators of being able to break down some of these nuances, right? People go to a winery to learn about the wine. They want to taste the terroir. They want to understand what they're drinking. So you have a captive audience essentially when you have a brand.
They're looking for an experience, and so we've actually tried our best, not to be associated with like the cannabis industry. People are like, "Are you in the cannabis?" I say, "No, we're just we're a winery destination, hospitality, lifestyle brand that just happens to have an innovative product that has THC in it." We're realizing there's a shift happening with consumers right now, and so we're going to put a best-in-class product. Doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. I don't even look at that. I look at what we're doing. How can we educate people on these, and how can we educate people outside of the space on these? How can we get to as many politicians, police officers, sheriffs, DAs, FBI agents? They've all been there when we were throwing these events and doing it, not to mention thousands of people in this community alone. And so we've really just tried to separate and just blaze our own path using this 35-year goodwill brand that we have to be able to prop in on that education. And that's why I believe that wineries and places like that with a story are able to really, they're going to be the ones that to help normalize this. And so
Right, yeah. We need these safe places for people to slow step into it. And beverage is a perfect slow step into the category. Right. If you set a potency cap, like I've never heard of anybody getting too stoned off of a 5 milligram beverage. If anything, you might just not feel much, which is the risk that we were willing to take. Is saying we don't need to produce this overwhelming effect, right? If you go into the right, and the sessionability factor, right? Like we know that these aren't pills, right? These are experiential products. So you're meant to have one at a party, having something in your hand. I mean, we're drinking beverages now is the most socially kind of comfortable thing to be in a social environment with. Nobody's at parties with pre-rolls or cigarettes. We're all holding beverage.
What's the first thing you do when you walk into an event?
And then come back.
Exactly.
What's the first thing you do when you walk into an event? Go grab some type of beverage.
Yeah.
And then you're like, all right, that's the first thing before
I look
you
for the appetizer.
Right.
So that makes sense. If you have some generic brand with some overdone graphic, and am I going to drink that? But if it's the sleek, classy Sunstone brand, it's like, oh, this is kind of like that wine. This is like a cool thing. So that's kind of what you're going after.
Right.
Is there ever a world when you can have it at the winery? Like,
well, I think that's the world that I think that's coming. And like places, again, like Minnesota, where it's at breweries. I mean, when before the ban, it was already at several locations, including several bars that were heartbroken when it just got taken away because they were starting to do so well. It was just starting to take off until that came.
Like you get Brass Bear, which is a family establishment. You know, they even have a kids area. I go there all the time because my kid loves playing in the block area. They were like, man, we were crushing it with parents who didn't want to get drunk and who wanted something chill to take the edge off. Being a parent, it's hard. And that is actually a huge demographic. I mean, I feel like I'm a better parent, you know, when I drink one of these things. I'm just like more, it puts you more omnipresent, right? And we'll get into the discussion about how it's supposed to make you feel, but I think that, you know, those on-premise locations were really heartbroken. Like they were just like, wait, what? We can't sell these now?
I mean, yeah, it's going to be hotels, hotel rooms, all of this stuff. It's coming.
You see that happening?
Oh, absolutely. That's going to happen very soon here, and you know, and so that's why, you know, gearing up to create what we believe is the best product on the market.
Are you gonna get a fight back from the alcohol industry on
No,
this? Like,
the alcohol,
they want
no,
it.
they want it. At the WSWA Access Live event, which is when the 40% of the booths were THC beverages. All of the big distributors want this. That's why they just wrote a letter to the United States government and saying we're flying all of these biggest alcohol distributors in the world. They're all like, they can't, they know it's happening. They're like, but the gray area and like, well, you know, is it legal? Is it not legal? They're still like kind of holding back, but they're watching all these people like, okay, this is a proven model here. That's why the beverage sector of this whole category is like a category of its own. They all want to put it through their distribution channels. And it's like they're getting crushed. I mean, Southern Glazer's just laid off over 1,000 employees a couple months ago because alcohol sales are down, not just across the United States, but across the world. I say this all this time, we're in this like once in a lifetime generational shift where people are gravitating away from alcohol and to THC beverages, microdose mushroom beverage or whatever. And so that's next. But, you know, and so, but.
Is that the next episode?
Yeah.
Look, it's all about the experience. It's not about the product. In fact, we're launching a functional beverage through Sunstone that is not intoxicating at all. It's going to have lion's mane, cordyceps, which are two like non-intoxicating mushrooms that are great for brain health and energy. It's going to have alpha GPC. It's going to have L-theanine. You know, it's going to have a little bit of yerba mate, right? It's going to have this cocktail that we've created to give you an energizing and uplifting effect just with botanicals and plants.
It's incredible.
Has nothing to do
that now.
And we can do that now. There's no THC. You know, there's no cannabinoid. We needed also a product to be the steward or the flagship to move through this space without any regulation, without any headwinds. We've been getting just whipsawed back and forth with the cannabis stuff, the hemp stuff. It's a little chaotic, right? And so since California doesn't allow hemp THC, we need to go out there and still say, hey, we're an experiential brand, right? We're kind of molecule agnostic, if you will. Alcohol, THC, mushroom, supplement, whatever. It's a brand. It's about the experience. It's about the lifestyle. And our gift to the world is to show you that we can help you do this right. We can hand you this amazing stimulus to your economy, to your people, to your mental and public health, you know, and there's basically, you know, the risk reward is exceptional here. And so if you don't adopt it, you know, really take a look at, you know, the public should be asking, like, why are these regulators not adopting this? Because this will change lives. We've all known someone that has alcohol dependency issues. I mean, it's the most widely abused drug in the world. I think caffeine was there. I think alcohol is next. But alcohol is deleterious to public health. No one can say that alcohol truly makes our world a better place, right? And so, but the opposite is true with these low-dose beverages. They have no deleterious effects to society. They're not addictive. You know, you're not gonna die from it. You're not gonna be in a treatment center. You know, it's not gonna ruin families. It's not gonna create more driving incidents. The studies just don't show that. I mean, we've been in a version of like a case study in our country since the 60s. You know, how many people do you know of that get in bar fights and stab each other when they're consuming cannabis? None. It's just not a thing. So
I want to talk about you two a little bit because you work together, you complement each other. Perfect team. I forgot the term you used, but you know, you're sort of this match made in heaven here. And you know, Kalon, you jump out of helicopters, you ride mountain bikes. You're kind of you're an impressive individual. You're like a daredevil, right? And you're also this science person. You guys known each other a long time. Talk to me about how you came to be in this.
It's a really fortuitous situation. I mean, my wife and his family have actually grew up together before I actually met her. But Teddy and I went to elementary school together. I was in the same class as Jameer, his younger brother, and Teddy was kind of like an older brother, I guess you could say, kind of like looked up to him in elementary school. And then, you know, just through, you know, the community, we were able to rejoin forces a couple years ago, and we both saw the writing on the wall that we're like, hey, we can do a lot together, and we trust each other, and we have a great bond. And I think that those are the forming ingredients that you need for a great partnership. And Teddy is an amazing steward in the community. He's involved in so much. He has a great voice, and so I bring the responsible products that I know that Teddy can stand behind. I mean, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, it's just, again, it's how everything kind of came full circle since we first met in elementary school. It's really amazing because, yeah, these products don't exist without him. You know, I've been obviously thinking about it for a long time, but you have to, again, with a brand to protect, doing it the right way, there's very few people in the cannabis industry that I don't even want to work with, you know, and so to find Kalon and to kind of reunite has just been a huge blessing. And so, I mean, the last few years have been just an amazing roller coaster that we're on. I truly believe we're making a huge change in the world. I think it'll be looked upon, what we're all doing is, will be reflected on that as the years, go by. But it's like you said, it's a match made in heaven because he's a sign. All I can say is, Kalon, you put together the best product. I'll go tell the whole world about it.
Yeah, and we've kind of, I have a company, right, that formulates products for other people and contract manufactures those products and helps them, basically we birth brands and products for a living, right? And this is like a side project that I work on with Teddy that I'm ultra passionate about. And, Teddy also is he runs a winery, he, sees thousands of visitors a week, he has a very robust and busy business as well. And this is kind of like our little pet project, if you will, because we both believe in it so much. And so we both contribute a lot of our personal time and sacrifice a lot of time away from our families and our businesses just to be able to steward this together. It's not like right now, it's obviously not like a super profitable endeavor, but, we are building and laying the groundwork to be able to change this entire scene.
And as the regulations get in place and there's actually, a tunnel to where you can run through, I believe that Sunstone will be the biggest beverage brand in the entire space in a few short years.
Did you approach Teddy, say, hey, I want to do this, and you have this brand, and let's partner up? Or did you
came naturally?
Yeah.
It kind of came together really naturally. I think, Teddy had, you can speak to it, but you had this vision of really, there's articles that have been written about buying a winery to get into weed, Teddy has adapted really well, and I've been on the same mission the whole time, more or less. We've pivoted, but Teddy is a testament to following the winds of change and just adapting really, really seamlessly, because originally they were going to cultivate on the property. I kind of was like, look, you're a winery, we should do beverages. It's, that synergy kind of naturally evolved, and it didn't take more than a few minutes for Teddy to be like, that's what we're doing. And so, ditched any kind of, you want to talk about that? Kind of like your story of
Yeah. Well, that was, again, it's interesting how everything's evolved, because when we were first going down this path, I felt like it had, there's a huge target on, the back. That's when, it was wine versus cannabis and this whole thing. And I'm sitting back, I'm like, gosh, if anybody should be doing it, it's a winery. You guys already have the most beautiful properties. You got a brand, you got a wine club members, you have all these things that, I mean, the two crops are so compatible, it's like, it's easy to merge. And so I was like, yeah, the early vision was like, wine tours, cannabis tours, learn about the grape, pick the grapes, do that and all that stuff. But then again, with all the red tape that the cannabis industry comes with, you're like about to close, and you're just like, well, you got to do all this other, and it's just like, this doesn't make any sense. And the whole industry, the cannabis industry, and how the model is set in California and across the country in each individual state, it's just, the model doesn't make sense. And so it was easy to be like, nothing on property, let's go. We're surrounded by the best farmers in the country that farm cannabis. Let's go to our friends, use theirs to make our,
like how wineries do. I mean, they'll source estate grapes.
It's like
from
sourcing
local,
grapes.
Yeah. So we figured, the beverage was also the most product market fit form factor to the existing consumers. I mean, winery people aren't going to go be like pre-roll consumers all of a sudden. They're going to drink stuff, and they're going to and we figured if we could deliver an exceptional palate in that product, that it would be congruent with the tastes and desires that a typical wine enthusiast would enjoy. And that was the original intent, and it's just taken its path. And then since hemp became a viable product category or overarching regulatory framework, we're utilizing that, and that's what everybody's utilizing to birth this industry from the ashes. So it's been a journey.
And I think another huge factor of just going back to is the odor aspect. I know the odor was a big thing. We didn't want that to affect, and it was always a big deal to like, how is this really going to work? Are we going to really test it? Should we build out 1 acre at it to see if it? But also smokable products, like you can't smoke at Sunstone. And so that's why, again, the beverage category kind of stands on its own. And that's the interesting thing about the whole federal legalization, because there's so many different ways to use cannabis, smoking, edibles, vape pens, all this stuff. It's hard to like put a model together, whereas beverages, there's already a model for how you distribute them, how you age gate them, how you properly label them. There's an infrastructure that's already built in. You can use that alcohol 3-tier system to kind of to do it. And so again, the non-odor aspect of going to a restaurant, going to a bar, you're not going to be sitting next to someone that's going to be smoked. That'll never work, right? But if I'm having a beverage and you're having a glass of wine or a beer, no one's going to say anything. It's not going to matter. And so,
do you ever see yourself going beyond a 5 milligram hemp spritzer? I mean, you mentioned 100 milligrams, which I would imagine is, you're kind of out of it if you drink one of those.
That's ridiculous. Like I'll say that in the ready to drink format, we are pushing for 5 milligrams, and on premise, I think it's going to be less. To be honest, when we've polled distributors, they want to be able to sell multiple beverages. Like for most people, 5 milligrams is a dose. Okay, we make a drink additive that's called Splash, Sunstone Splash. And it's like a spirit, right? So it would be your equivalent of your alcohol, your tequila, your spirit, right? So the consumer could choose, hey, I want to do 10, right? But we're not going to do that in a ready-to-drink format. We're going to do that in a spirit format that's addable to your own drink or to an existing hemp beverage, however that works. But many consumers will want a higher dose because you build a tolerance up, right, and not everybody experiences 5 milligrams the same way. I have people in my office who can take 1,000 milligrams. We need to study them. I personally cannot do that, right? And so, but the consumer should be able to choose because there is no lethal dose. Yeah. So, and I know people that can drive on 100 milligrams and be totally fine. Not recommending that, but it's the truth. Yeah. I don't know anyone that can drive on a fifth of vodka. Yeah. So it's just, it needs a little bit of time, I think, right, to percolate into
a higher dose. Is there a future where we do a 10 to catch up with the market that in 5 years? Sure, but as far as right now, when you're trying to put sensible regulations in place, and you're like, obviously within sensible regulation, first thing is like, what's the maximum milligram? Well, and again, we could say, it's easy to say 20 milligrams, but what's that going to potentially do? Then you're I wanted to look irresponsible. So I think the most responsible dose is 5. Let's get a win, and then let's see where we are in 2 or 3 years. Let's let it play out.
All right, so
Sorry.
we have about 10 minutes or so, so I want to kind of like give you an opportunity to say what I have not asked you about, but it's so interesting, it's so fascinating. But I want to just sort of like end with this question and then let you guys riff on what you want to say, which is, you sent me a lot of photos of you rubbing elbows with these people in suits in DC, these big wigs that that you're trying to
No, wrong guy, wrong Teddy.
you're trying to talk to these politicians, and Salud Carbajal, and you've been on some of these trips as well. How soon is this going to happen? I mean, is Newsom going to just do this and say it's going to happen, or what work is left for you all to do?
Great question.
So that's a great question. Just 2 weeks ago, the California Department of Public Health, who is the one, it's basically, that's the reason for the ban, is there was a health issue. They sent out a memo to a bunch of hemp shareholders, I think they called it, asking for feedback, which was surprising, but that's good, because that means that they're like taking industry feedback, because they don't really understand how to put, I don't want to tell them that they don't understand, but I think they need a lot of help in how do we make these sensible regulations, how does it all make sense, how does it all trickle through, because you have to think of, testing, labeling, age gating, then going through the distributor and all the different channels. So being able to help them with that, I think they need that. And so that's what we continue to do. I think we wrote a pretty great letter to them in response. So we definitely gave them feedback. And you could find that and go ahead.
Look, we're in this, like I mentioned earlier, we're in this trifecta, right? You have public safety, you have policy, and you have industry, existing industry, right? And so the existing industry part has been a battle. The dispensaries have had to sort of like figure out how they're going to give up ground to allow this product that they thought they had control over to permeate outside of their ecosystem, and that's a head scratcher for them.
So they're fighting against it.
They're fighting against it, and not so much on the beverage side, because I think any dispensary operator will agree, and I want to meet the one that doesn't agree, that low-dose beverages just don't move in dispensaries.
That's the one thing that does, it's the one part that doesn't compete with dispensary sales.
That's
why we're looking for the carve-out, so you kind of appease everybody.
Yeah.
But on the industry side, I think we can reach bipartisan support about low-dose beverages. I don't think that's a challenge. But now you have the policy folks, and they're scratching their heads going like, well, there's all these nuances, like, Prop 64 is robust, like, what legislation are we going to put into place? And so I think, it's anybody's guess, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime super soon, to be completely honest. But what will happen, and what people need to realize, is that prohibition doesn't work. So we had an illicit market in California, and we're fighting against that still. We have regulation, and the taxes are basically incentivizing consumers to go back to their neighborhood dealer to pick up flour in a bag because it's so expensive in the stores. So I think that like the regulators need to sober up really about like the fact that they can't enforce anything if they don't have any tax revenue, right? So enforcement's the other piece of it. You need to create an environment where the good actors can thrive, pay their taxes, create enforcement funds so that they can displace the bad actors. Right. You need to use economics and public safety and industry together in tandem to create these systems. And I think that, California's political sort of like temperature for this has been very low for some reason, even though consumers want it, and it's rippling across the country, and you see it in other states. So when that like intersection of public safety, policy, and industry come together, that's what we're trying to push. I don't think it's going to happen very soon, but I do think that we're starting to see the early indicators that they're changing their tide a little bit. We want to help, but
I think it'll happen. I think it'll happen by next year. Is what I'm hoping.
People would be very happy if it could happen by next year.
And so then we'll see Sunstone spritz
in there,
drinks.
Hopefully every store, every state, everywhere you can buy an alcoholic beverage. That's where we want to be.
We want to be the hometown hero like 805 was for Firestone. Bigger, bigger. That was like an accident, more or less. But
will there be other if you do all the work here, front lines, helping to make this legal, are we going to see everyone sort of jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, we love it.
We want the category to build.
Yeah, exactly. Want to build a category. I was actually just talking to somebody. It's crazy because I get messages on LinkedIn from other winery owners in France, Italy that are going to be at this show that are like, how did you do this? And so there's really this change coming where you're going to see, and we was just talking about it with my wife this morning about, creating like even an association with wineries around the world that are wanting to do this. And in 10 years from now, you're going to see those stars on the map of global destinations that you can have those types of experiences.
Our kids will be like, wait, there was a difference?
Right, exactly. They're not going to even know the difference. Right. But Sunstone will be the first, known as the first, and
Yeah, we take great pride in that.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be able to talk to you because you are the match made in heaven, but you're also the perfect two to be able to educate the public on this issue. And you're doing a lot of amazing work, and you're like the science guy and the brand guy, and it's hopefully all going to come together. So maybe we'll do this show, again, and we can have the spritzers here, because it'll be just like coffee.
Absolutely, exactly. It's what it's going to be.
Yeah, Kalon Baird, Teddy Cabugos, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Josh.
you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us, Josh.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to this special episode of Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. Live here in the TVSB studios. Always a pleasure to be here with this crew. Thanks a lot.